Have you ever found yourself just looking at something totally normal, like, say, a chair, just a regular chair, and then you sort of stop and think, okay, but what is a chair, really? Not, if this chair, the one right here, maybe it's got a scratch, whatever. But the actual idea of chairness, like what's the essence? What makes any chair a chair? That kind of question is not just some weird thought experiment. It's actually really philosophical, and it's pretty much at the core of what we're diving into today. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a whole bunch of sources, articles, research, our own notes, and, well, we dig through them. We pull out the key insights, the really important stuff, so you get informed without, drowning in information. Today, we're plunging headfirst into one of the biggest, most influential ideas in all of Western philosophy, Plato's theory of ideas. You might also know it as the theory of forms. Same thing, basically. Our main guide for this exploration comes from deep dives into excerpts from the history of Western philosophy. We're really focusing on the chapter called The Theory of Ideas. So, our mission today, pretty straightforward, really. We want to unpack this whole theory. We want to see where it came from, especially how it pops up in Plato's huge work, The Republic. And we need to explore what it actually means for how we think about, well, everything. Reality, knowledge.
Epistemology, yeah. The theory of knowledge itself.
Right, epistemology.
Yeah.
And even what it means to be a philosopher, according to Plato. We'll look at why it caused such a stir back then, and honestly why it still makes us think, or maybe even argue today.
Absolutely. We're going on a bit of an intellectual adventure here, asking you to look past the surface.
Yeah, and this isn't just like ancient history for academics, not at all.
Yeah.
It touches on really fundamental stuff we still grapple with. Like, how do you tell appearance from reality? What's real knowledge versus just, someone's opinion? And even what makes a society good or just? These questions are just as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago.
They really are, and I'm here to help connect those ancient dots to the bigger picture for you.
Okay, so to really get Plato's theory of ideas, we need to set the scene a bit. Context is key here. This wasn't just some random idea Plato dreamed up in isolation. No way. It's actually woven right into the fabric of his most famous work, The Republic.
Deeply embedded, yeah.
Especially in the later parts, right? Like Book 5 towards the end, all the way through Book 7.
That's the core section, yes. And it's interesting, our source points out that these specific books, they shift focus. They move beyond just talking about, say, the politics of an ideal city and dive deep into pure philosophy, really fundamental questions about reality and knowledge. It sets the stage perfectly.
And the kickoff for this huge philosophical discussion, according to our source, is this statement that feels almost abrupt.
Yeah, it kind of lands out of nowhere almost.
Plato just declares that for cities to be truly great, for wisdom to rule, for humankind to basically escape evil and live well, then kings, rulers, princes, they have to become philosophers.
Or the other way
Or
around.
philosophers have to become kings, like one or the other.
Think about how radical that must have sounded.
Totally. It's not just a suggestion. It's like a condition for a good society. And it immediately makes you ask, okay, wait, what exactly is a philosopher in Plato's mind? And what is this philosophy they're supposed to practice if it's going to run a whole state?
It reframes everything.
Exactly. It's not just a political structure. It's a whole philosophical blueprint for society based on a very specific idea of wisdom.
It's a fascinating pivot, isn't it? Because he's not just, writing a job description for a good ruler.
Right.
He's fundamentally changing what ruling is, what the goal is. He's saying the health of the state and even the individual soul, it all depends on this massive shift in perspective. Good leadership isn't about power or armies or just being good at managing things day to day.
Yeah.
It's about this deep, rigorous, unwavering commitment to finding ultimate truth. So it's not just someone who studies philosophy on the side.
Yeah.
It's someone whose whole life, whose every decision is guided by this relentless search for truth. That's the ruler Plato wants. The stakes are incredibly high.
That's such a critical point. It flips the whole idea of leadership on its head. And Plato, well, being Plato, he doesn't just leave it there. He tells us what he means by philosopher. At first, based on the Greek roots, he says a philosopher is a lover of wisdom. Makes sense.
Philosophia, love of wisdom.
Exactly, or a lover of knowledge. But then almost immediately, he tightens it up. He clarifies. The true philosopher, he says, is someone who loves the vision of truth.
That word vision is important.
It is. It's not just liking knowledge. It's this deep, consuming passion for seeing truth itself.
Yeah.
And this is where we get this absolutely vital distinction. It sets up everything else. To really nail down what Plato means, let's compare the philosopher to, well, a non-philosopher. Imagine someone who just loves beautiful things. Maybe they love going to plays or collecting art or listening to music.
They appreciate beauty in its specific forms.
Exactly. They love the things that are beautiful. But the philosopher, they love absolute beauty, beauty itself. So it's not just looking at a beautiful sunset and saying, wow, though that's nice too. It's about trying to understand the underlying, unchanging essence of beauty. The form of beauty that makes the sunset beautiful in the first place. So the non-philosopher knows beautiful things, temporary, specific examples. But the philosopher seeks knowledge of absolute beauty, eternal, universal.
And that, for Plato, is the difference between mere opinion,
which the first person had,
and true knowledge, which only the philosopher can attain. It's a fundamental split in how you engage with the world. And what's so revealing here is that Plato isn't just giving us definitions, he's actually building a hierarchy.
A hierarchy of understanding.
Exactly, a hierarchy of understanding. He's suggesting that the quality of what you love, what you aim your deepest desires at, is directly tied to how wise you can become. The person loving beautiful things, their focus is on particulars, things that change, fade, are always imperfect. They're stuck in the world of the senses.
Right, the everyday world.
But the philosopher's love, it's aimed higher. At the universal, the timeless, the perfect blueprint of beauty itself, that's the real source. This distinction is absolutely foundational for his whole system. It tells us that what we pursue and how we pursue it determines our capacity for what he considers real wisdom. It's about moving beyond the surface level.
That split between loving the specific things and loving the universal idea behind them, between beautiful things and beauty itself, that really sets the stage perfectly for Plato's next massive idea, the difference between knowledge and opinion. Okay, so this brings us to what is, I think you'd agree, the absolute foundation of Plato's epistemology.
Absolutely central, yeah.
And just to remind everyone, epistemology is that branch of philosophy all about knowledge, how we get it, what it is, what its limits are.
Right, the theory of knowledge.
So for Plato, this divide, this huge gap between knowledge and opinion, it's not just a small difference in words. It's the fundamental distinction. It holds up his entire philosophy.
It really does.
For him, knowledge is about something that is, something permanent, unchanging, eternal, something outside of time and space, in a way.
Immutable.
Whereas opinion,
Yeah.
that relates to stuff that both is and is not. Things that are constantly changing, shifting, unstable. And because of that, ultimately unreliable. And our source material makes a really important connection here. It says this distinction is reminiscent of Parmenides.
Yes, an earlier philosopher. Very influential.
Right. Parmenides basically argued that true reality, what is, must be unchanging and eternal. You can't know what is not.
Correct. Being is, not being is not.
So Plato builds on that. For him, true knowledge has to be infallible. You can't be wrong about it if it's real knowledge. But opinion can be wrong, easily. It's fallible, it depends on circumstances, it just lacks that certainty.
And that difference is absolutely massive for how we think about truth.
Okay, so what does this actually mean for us, in practice? Think about the examples our source uses. Something that's beautiful is also ugly, or large is also small.
Relative terms.
Take a specific painting. Someone might think it's incredibly beautiful, but someone else, or even the same person looking at it differently, might see flaws, might think parts of it are ugly.
Or beautiful in one aspect, clumsy in another.
Exactly. So it is beautiful in one sense, but it is not beautiful in another. Or something is large compared to one thing, but small compared to another.
It possesses contradictory qualities depending on the context or observer.
Right. So if something can be both beautiful and not beautiful, or just and not just, at the same time, how can that be the basis for true, certain, infallible knowledge?
They can't be. It's always shifting.
It's inherently contradictory, unstable. So for Plato, that kind of thing belongs firmly in the realm of opinion, not knowledge.
This is such a critical point, and it really throws down a challenge. If everything we perceive with our senses is inherently contradictory like this, if the world around us is always in flux where things both are and are not, then how can we ever claim to truly know anything for sure?
Yeah, good question.
Plato's answer forces us away from relying only on our senses. He's saying, look, if you trust only your eyes and ears, you're stuck in a world of shifting opinions forever because the things you're sensing are themselves always changing. They are becoming. They never just permanently are.
Oh, okay. Becoming versus being.
Exactly. So true knowledge, for Plato, must grab hold of something that goes beyond these contradictions, something that simply is without changing, without qualification. This logical problem, this deep epistemological puzzle, is precisely what leads him to propose a totally different kind of reality.
And that puzzle, and Plato's radical solution, leads us straight to his idea of two completely distinct worlds, or realms. We end up concluding that opinion. That belongs to the world our senses show us. The sensible world, he calls it.
The world of particulars, of change.
Right, the world of individual things, constant change, always becoming something else. But knowledge, that belongs to a higher, supersensible, eternal world, the world of forms.
It's a huge metaphysical leap he's making.
And our source connects us really neatly to earlier Greek thinkers, too. You might remember Heraclitus, famous for saying, all things flow. You can't step in the same river twice.
Pantare. Everything flows.
His idea was that reality is constant change. Nothing ever truly is stable. Plato basically says, yeah, Heraclitus, he nailed the sensible world. That world is constant flux, things coming and going.
But that's only half the picture for Plato.
Exactly. Because then he brings in Parmenides, who argued that for something to be truly real, truly knowable, it must be unchanging, permanent, eternal.
And that's the realm of the forms.
Precisely. So this isn't just some abstract philosophical point. It shapes Plato's whole view of reality, his metaphysics. Our senses give us opinions because they deal with a changing world. But true knowledge has to grasp something permanent and eternal.
And that something is the form.
Okay, so we've got this crucial split. Knowledge versus opinion, the sensible world versus this higher, supersensible world. Now let's finally get into what these ideas or forms actually are.
The heart of the theory, really.
Our source says this theory is partly logical about what concepts mean and partly metaphysical about what's ultimately real.
Both aspects are there.
At its core, it's about universal concepts. Think about it simply. What do we mean when we say the word cat? We don't just mean this specific cat snoozing over there or that specific cat we saw yesterday.
No, we mean something general.
Right. We mean the general idea of catness, the essence that lets us look at millions of different furry creatures and say, yep, that's a cat. So if the word cat is going to mean anything consistent, Plato argues, it has to refer to something beyond any particular cat, something that doesn't get born or die, an eternal essence.
This universal catness.
That's the form of the cat.
Yeah.
And these forms, for Plato, aren't just ideas in our heads. That's crucial.
No, they're objectively real.
They exist independently of us, independently of any particular cat. They are the real, eternal, unchanging, perfect blueprints.
Perfect paradigms, exactly.
And everything we see in our physical world, every actual cat, it's just a kind of reflection, an imperfect copy of that perfect form.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, what Plato's proposing here is, well, it's truly radical. He's saying the physical world we experience through our senses, it's fundamentally like a shadow world.
Wow.
An imitation of a truer, more perfect reality. The things we see and touch, they aren't fully real in the highest sense. They just sort of participate in the reality of the forms.
Participate. How?
Well, that's one of the tricky questions we'll get to later. But the idea is they borrow their reality from the forms. He uses this famous example in the Republic about beds.
Oh, yeah. Bed example.
Right. He says, look, there are lots of individual animals, like many cats, but there's only one idea or form of cat. Similarly, there are many physical beds made by carpenters, but there's only one idea or form of bed, the perfect bedness, which, interestingly, he says is made by God.
Made by God, so the form is divine.
In this analogy, yes. It represents the perfect original creation. And all the beds carpenters make, they're just copies, reflections, mere appearances. So, get this. The physical bed you might sleep on tonight, it's less real for Plato than the eternal, unchanging form of the bed that exists in that higher realm.
That really does turn things upside down, doesn't it? What we think is solid and real is actually secondary.
Precisely. It suggests our everyday reality is derived from, and secondary to, a higher, unseen, perfect order.
Okay, so if I'm following this, what you, our listener, are seeing and touching every day, this whole world of physical objects, it's basically a world of copies, imperfect reflections.
According to Plato, yes, that's the implication.
And if that's true, then the philosopher's main job, their highest calling, is to somehow see past these copies, to look through the illusions of this sensible world and grasp the original blueprint.
Exactly. To grasp the true bedness, the real catness, the absolute form of whatever they're contemplating.
Which brings us right back to why the philosopher is so important for Plato. Because the philosopher, By training their mind to grasp this ideal bed, this perfect form, they're the one who can achieve real knowledge.
Well, the carpenter.
The carpenter, who only deals with physical beds and maybe doesn't even think about the perfect form. They can only ever have opinion.
Right. Practical skill, perhaps, but not true philosophical knowledge.
Plato says the philosopher has this magnificence of mind. They're a spectator of all time and all existence. Sounds pretty grand.
It is a grand vision.
So pursuing philosophy isn't just reading books. It's this intense discipline, training your mind, learning, developing a naturally harmonious mind that can see the universal.
It's a journey upward.
Yeah, moving from just sensing things from the world of shadows and copies up to intellectual understanding, from opinion to genuine knowledge.
And this whole idea, seeing beyond appearances to a truer reality. There's no better illustration of it than Plato's most famous story.
Ah, yes. The big one. All right, let's really try to picture this. Plato's Allegory of the Cave. It's probably the most famous image in all of philosophy, right?
Easily iconic.
So imagine this huge underground cave, a den. And inside, there are people who've been chained up since they were kids. Chains by their legs, so tightly they can't even turn their heads.
Completely immobilized, facing one direction.
They can only stare straight ahead at the cave wall in front of them. That's all they've ever seen. Now behind them, further back in the cave, there's a fire burning, casting light.
Flickering light, yeah.
And between the fire and these chained prisoners, there's a raised path with a sort of low wall running along it, like a screen for a puppet show.
Mm-hmm.
And behind this wall, unseen by the prisoners, people are walking back and forth carrying things, statues, figures of animals, tools, all sorts of objects.
And the fire.
The fire casts the shadows of these objects onto the cave wall that the prisoners are forced to watch. Just try to put yourself there for a second. Born in that cave, chained up, never seen anything else. What would you think is real?
Only the shadows. That would be your entire reality.
You wouldn't even know about the fire or the people carrying things or anything outside the cave wall.
And what's so powerful here is how deep Plato suggests this illusion goes. The prisoners don't just see the shadows, they hear echoes too, maybe voices bouncing off the walls from the people carrying the objects. And they believe these shadows are reality, the only reality. They'd probably watch them closely, give them names, talk about their movements, maybe even have competitions about who can predict which shadow comes next.
Like their whole world, their knowledge is built on these flickering images.
Exactly. Their entire existence is based on mistaking these flat projections for the real thing, which forces us to ask that uncomfortable question again. How often do we do that?
Oof.
How often do we mistake superficial appearances, maybe media images, political rhetoric, social conventions, for genuine substance?
Leaving the shadows on our own cave wall.
Precisely. Plato's making us wonder if our everyday reality might be more like that cave than we'd like to admit.
It's a deeply unsettling thought, isn't it? That maybe we're the ones staring at shadows. Okay, now imagine the turning point. One prisoner is suddenly set free. Maybe someone unchains him, forces him. He's compelled to turn around.
Against his will, perhaps. It's painful.
Exactly. First, the fire he's never really seen. It hurts his eyes. It's too bright after a lifetime of dim shadows. Then he sees the actual objects being carried along the wall. And slowly, confusingly, he starts to realize, wait, these things are more real than the shadows.
A huge disorienting realization.
But it doesn't stop there. He's then dragged, Plato says dragged, forcefully, painfully, up out of the cave, up this steep, rough path into the sunlight outside.
Imagine the shock.
Total shock.
Yeah.
The sun, after living in a dark cave, it's blinding, agonizing. He literally can't see anything at first. But then, slowly, painfully, his eyes start to adjust. At first, maybe he can only look at reflections, shadows of real things, reflections in water.
Easier on the eyes.
Then gradually, he can look at the actual objects, the trees, the animals, the people, the sky. And finally, after much effort, much contemplation, he can look directly at the sun itself.
The source of all light and truth in the allegory.
And he understands it's not just a bright light. It's the source of everything he now sees. The source of seasons, of life, of truth.
Mm-hmm. The form of the good, in essence.
This, for me, is where it gets really powerful, that discomfort of learning, the actual pain of realizing what you thought was true wasn't.
The resistance to letting go of the old reality.
Yeah, that initial blindness when you first step into the light feeling lost and confused, even though you're seeing more clearly. It's such a potent metaphor for intellectual awakening, right?
Absolutely. It's not presented as easy or gentle. It's a struggle, a forceful reorientation of everything you thought you knew, indeed. And the allegory's significance goes even further beyond just the individual's journey. If we connect it back to the bigger picture, Plato isn't just painting a picture of enlightenment. He's posing a serious ethical and social problem.
Okay, how so?
Well, the freed prisoner, the one who's seen the sun, the true reality, he feels pity for the others still stuck in the cave.
Right, he'd want to help him.
He feels a duty, a moral obligation.
Yeah.
So he goes back down, back into the darkness.
Oh, that sounds difficult.
Extremely. Because now his eyes, used to the bright sunlight, can barely see in the dim cave. He stumbles around. He can't make out the shadows clearly like he used to.
So the others would think he's crazy.
Worse than crazy, they mock him. They say his journey outside ruined his eyesight, made him stupid. His talk of a brighter world sounds like nonsense to them. And Plato adds this chilling detail. They'd likely resist fiercely if anyone tried to free them. They might even try to kill anyone who attempted to drag them out of their familiar darkness.
Wow, that's dark.
It really is. And it ties directly back to that philosopher king idea.
Ah, okay. The philosopher has seen the light.
The philosopher, the enlightened one, has this moral duty to return, to try and guide others towards the truth, to govern with that knowledge for the good of everyone.
Even if they're hated for it.
Even if they're misunderstood, ridiculed, or met with hostility. The burden of knowledge includes the responsibility to use it, even against resistance. It forces us, and you listening, to think. What really stands out to you about this whole journey? Do you see parallels? The comfort of the familiar illusion, the painful process of learning something new that challenges your beliefs, the way society sometimes reacts to radical new ideas.
Yeah, the resistance to change, even if the change is towards truth.
It's a timeless dynamic, isn't it? A struggle Plato captured perfectly.
It really is timeless. You can see versions of that story playing out all the time.
Yeah.
It really helps clarify the different levels of understanding Plato was talking about as you climb out of that cave. Okay, so building on that incredible image of the cave, Plato actually gets a bit more technical about the levels of understanding. He sort of divides our way of grasping the world into 4 stages, really. 2 levels of sense perception and 2 higher levels of intellect.
Right, refining the basic knowledge-opinion split.
So the lowest level is just seeing the shadows and reflections in the caves, illusion, eikasia. Then comes seeing the actual physical objects that cast the shadows. That's like belief, pistis, thinking the physical world is the ultimate reality.
Still tied to the senses, to the particulars in the cave or the physical world?
Exactly. But then he moves beyond the senses to the intellect. And here he makes another distinction between understanding and reason.
Dianoia and noesis.
Right. Understanding dianoia, he links closely with sciences like mathematics, geometry, for instance. Our source uses the example of triangles. Think about it. Have you ever seen a perfectly straight line or a perfect triangle in the physical world?
No, there's always some tiny imperfection if you look closely enough. A drawn line has thickness, angles aren't perfectly exact.
Exactly. But the idea of a perfect triangle with perfectly straight sides, angles adding up precisely to 180 degrees, that exists, Plato would say, in heaven, in the world of forms.
As a concept.
As a perfect concept. So when a mathematician says, let ABC be a triangle, they're not talking about a specific drawing. They're talking about the abstract, perfect form.
So mathematics uses these perfect concepts.
Yeah, it helps us train our mind to think about these perfect, unchanging things using logic and deduction. It's a bridge away from the purely physical.
Precisely. Math is like crucial mental gymnastics. It prepares the mind. But for Plato, the absolute highest level of intellect is reason, noesis, and its method is dialectic.
Dialectic. That sounds complicated.
It is, kind of. It's basically this rigorous process of philosophical argument. Questioning assumptions, testing hypotheses, arguing back and forth, trying to move from specific examples up to the universal principles, the forms themselves.
Without needing pictures or diagrams like in geometry.
Ideally, yes. Reason aims to grasp the pure forms directly through intellectual insight alone. It tries to get to the first principles, the ultimate truths, like the form of the good, without relying on the assumptions that mathematics still uses.
So it's like a ladder. Sense is at the bottom, then math is a step up, then pure philosophical reason at the very top.
That's a great way to put it. A ladder of cognition, moving from the visible world to the purely intelligible realm, guided by logic and this process of dialectic.
Okay, so Plato builds this incredibly detailed, ambitious system, the forms, the cave, the levels of knowledge. But here's what's really impressive, I think. He didn't just present it and say, there you go. He actually wrestled with its problems himself.
Immensely so. He was his own toughest critic in many ways.
Our source really highlights this, especially mentioning the dialogue called Parmenides. In that dialogue, Plato actually has the character of Parmenides, an older philosopher, raise some seriously difficult objections to the theory of forms, which is being defended by young Socrates.
It's fascinating. Plato is essentially stress testing his own theory in public, showing its potential weaknesses. It suggests he saw it as perhaps needing refinement.
Let's get into some of those specific objections Parmenides raises. Because they're not trivial, they really poke at the core of the theory, and philosophers still debate them. First, there's this huge issue of participation. We said physical things participate in the forms, but how?
What does participate actually mean? It's vague.
Exactly. Does a beautiful flower partake in the whole form of beauty, or just a part of it?
If it's the whole form, then that one single form of beauty has to be in countless different flowers all at once. How does one thing be in many places? Seems impossible.
Right. But if the flower only gets a part of the form of beauty,
Then the form itself must be divisible. It can be broken into pieces.
and that seems wrong too. Forms are supposed to be perfect, simple, indivisible universals.
Plus, Parmenides pushes it further. If a thing has only a part of, say, the form of smallness, wouldn't that part be smaller than smallness itself? Which sounds completely absurd.
Yeah, that melts your brain a bit. The logic gets tangled.
And then comes probably the most famous objection,
Okay.
be multiplicity, or the third man argument. Aristotle loved this one too.
The third man.
That's that. Okay, so the argument goes like this. You have individual humans, right? And they are all human because they participate in the form of humanness.
Makes sense so far.
Now, these individual humans are similar to each other, and Plato seems to imply they are also similar to the form of humanness itself, since they resemble it.
Right, they're copies of the form.
Okay, but if you have a group of similar things, all the individual humans plus the form of humanness, don't you need another form to explain that similarity? You'd need a third man form to account for the resemblance between the first form and the individuals. But then that form would also be similar to the first form and the individual.
Requiring a fourth form.
And a fifth and a sixth. Ad infinitum. An infinite regress.
So the forms, which were supposed to unify things, end up creating an infinite number of new forms.
Exactly. It undermines the whole point and makes the theory incredibly complex and maybe even incoherent.
Wow, okay. That's a powerful critique. What else did Parmenides bring up?
Well, there's the question of whether forms can just be thoughts. Socrates tentatively suggests maybe forms are just thoughts in our minds.
Like concepts.
Yeah, but Parmenides quickly points out thoughts have to be of something. They have content.
True.
So if a form is a thought, what is it a thought of? Is it a thought of nothing? That doesn't make sense. Is it a thought of something that exists? Then we're back to forms being real entities.
They can't just be subjective thoughts.
Not easily, no. And finally, Parmenides raises this really tricky point about whether the ideas can even be known by us. If forms exist in this absolute, perfect, divine realm, and our knowledge is human, imperfect, tied to this world,
how can we possibly know them? Is the gap too big?
Exactly. Can our limited minds grasp absolute perfection? And flipping it around, can God, who presumably knows the perfect forms, even know us in our messy, changing world? It implies this radical separation between the two realms. But, the fact that Plato himself raises these profound problems in the Parmenides dialogue, it's just remarkable.
It shows incredible intellectual honesty.
It really does. He's not just trying to sell a theory. He's genuinely exploring its limits, its paradoxes. He clearly knew there were difficulties. Our source mentions he particularly struggled with this multiplicity of the world of ideas. How do all these different forms relate? Are they all separate, or is there some unity?
Like, is there a form for mud and hair and dirt, as Parmenides asks young Socrates?
Exactly. Where does it stop, and how do they all connect? The source suggests that later, Plato might have moved towards a more unified view, perhaps suggesting that the ultimate principle is the good, or God, and that maybe the other forms are like qualities or aspects of God or the good.
Trying to bring it all together under one umbrella.
Perhaps. Trying to resolve that tension between the one and the many that runs through so much Greek philosophy. So even the great Plato was grappling, refining, maybe even revising his own monumental ideas. It just shows that philosophy is this ongoing process of questioning and searching.
That's actually really encouraging in a way. It means even the biggest ideas are open to scrutiny and development. It makes philosophy feel more alive. So after all this, the grand theory, the brilliant allegory, the tough criticisms, what's the final verdict? What kind of legacy did Plato's theory of ideas actually leave?
Well, it's huge, absolutely massive. Our source points out that Plato's thinking, especially this theory, echoed down through centuries of philosophy. You see its influence in Neoplatonism, in Christian theology, even arguably right up to someone like Hegel in the 19th century with his complex idealism.
So a massive influence.
Undeniably. But at the same time, it wasn't universally accepted. Not by a long shot.
Right. You mentioned Aristotle earlier.
Exactly. Plato's own star student, Aristotle, fundamentally disagreed. He rejected this idea of a separate world of transcendent forms. For Aristotle, the form or essence of a thing was immanent, meaning it existed within the particular object itself, not in some separate heaven.
Okay, so a major split right from the beginning.
A major split. And our source notes that many, perhaps most, modern philosophers tend to reject Plato's theory of ideas, at least in its original strong formulation. So it's both incredibly influential and deeply contentious. That's its legacy.
Now, there's a really interesting angle here regarding Plato and, surprisingly, science. Our source mentions Plato had this aesthetic bias, especially in astronomy.
Yes, a love for mathematical perfection.
He was convinced planets must move in perfect circles around the Earth because the circle was the most perfect geometric shape. It reflected the ideal cosmic order for him.
Seemed logical, beautiful, harmonious.
Yeah, but totally wrong, as we now know. Copernicus, Kepler, Newton, they showed orbits are elliptical, not circular.
Empirical evidence eventually won out over aesthetic preference.
But here's the twist, the counterintuitive point.
Mm.
Even though Plato was wrong about the circles, his fundamental insistence that the universe has an underlying mathematical order, that there's a deeper rational reality behind what we just see.
That very mindset.
That mindset arguably helped pave the way for science itself.
It's a fascinating argument.
Our source quotes this great line. Scientific history illustrates a general maxim that any hypothesis, however absurd, may be useful in science if it enables a discovery to conceive things in a new way.
So even a wrong idea can spark progress if it changes how you look at the problem?
Exactly. Plato's drive to find universal, unchanging mathematical truths beneath the messy surface. That impulse, that way of thinking, was incredibly fruitful, even if his specific guess about circles was off. It encouraged people to look for hidden structures.
And this really raises such an important question, relevant way beyond just Plato. Even if a specific scientific or philosophical idea gets disproven, like the circular orbits, can the approach, the underlying mindset, still be valuable, still push things forward?
It seems like the answer is yes in Plato's case.
I think so. Plato's deep conviction that reality is fundamentally rational, ordered, mathematically elegant, that there are universal truths to be found beyond just collaborations. That was a powerful engine for thought. It inspired generations to look for deeper explanations, to assume there was an underlying order, even if they disagreed on what that order was.
It trained minds to seek patterns, to seek unifying principles.
Right. It shows that the value of a big idea isn't always just about whether it's factually correct in every detail. Sometimes its power lies in how it reshapes our questions, how it opens up new ways of thinking, how it inspires that search for deeper understanding.
So putting it all together, what was the ultimate point of philosophy for Plato? What was he aiming for with all this?
Our source puts it beautifully. Philosophy for Plato is ultimately a kind of vision.
A vision?
Yeah, the vision of truth. It's not just dry intellectual puzzling. It's not just loving ideas in the abstract. It's meant to be this comprehensive, life-changing experience. It involves your whole being, your intellect, sure, but also your emotions, your will.
Like the journey out of the cave, it changes you completely.
Exactly. It's about connecting everything, logic, science, art, music, ethics, into this unified, holistic understanding of reality. He talks about achieving this clear, bright sunshine where everything makes sense, where all the pieces fit together in the light of truth.
So it's not just about learning facts or winning arguments.
No, not at all. The source mentions an intellectual love of God, or the good, and this intimate union of thought and feeling.
Wow. So philosophy, in Plato's view, isn't just thinking differently, it's seeing differently. It's a total transformation of how you perceive and understand the world.
The kind of wisdom that illuminates everything, reveals connections you never saw before.
And hopefully this deep dive today has given you, our listener, at least a glimpse into that kind of transformative vision.
A shortcut, maybe, to getting informed about one of history's most challenging, profound, and endlessly fascinating thinkers. Hashtag, tag, outro.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today, haven't we?
We really have. From philosopher kings all the way to the third man argument.
Yeah, we started with Plato's radical idea about rulers needing wisdom. Went through that crucial split between knowledge and opinion.
Unpacked the world of eternal forms.
Relived that incredibly powerful allegory of the cave.
And even dove into the tough criticisms Plato faced, and perhaps even leveled at himself.
It really shows that philosophy isn't static, it's a dynamic conversation. And at its heart, Plato's theory of ideas, it really pushes us, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
It forces us to question what we just accept as real. It challenges us to look beyond the surface, beyond the fleeting appearances.
To seek something deeper, more lasting.
It's really a call to move out of the shadows, the shadows of unexamined beliefs, of just going along with opinion.
And step into the light, even if it's difficult, the light of genuine understanding. It demands a certain intellectual courage.
So let's leave you with a final thought to chew on. Something to take away from this deep dive. If Plato is even partly right, if everything we normally perceive is just a shadow or a copy of a perfect eternal form, what would it actually mean to live your life differently? To consciously direct yourself towards pursuing those ideal forms, like absolute justice, absolute beauty, absolute goodness.
Instead of just chasing the shadows, the temporary things around us.
Right. What would that life look like? And maybe even bigger picture. How different would our world be if everyone, especially leaders, genuinely strove for those absolute ideals?
Striving to be a philosopher, kings and queens, seeking truth and goodness above all else.
Yeah, what kind of world would that be? Definitely something to think about. We really hope this exploration of Plato's theory of ideas has sparked your interest.
Maybe even inspired you to pick up the Republic itself. There's so much more richness there.
Absolutely. A whole world waiting beyond the shadows. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time.